I'm Swetha Mannepalli, your host. This is Fabric Executive Insights with DBT Labs and Microsoft Fabric. Thank you for being here, Kyle Dempsey from DBT Labs. He's a senior director at DBT Labs. And we have Tino from our own Microsoft. He leads all up Fabric Data Warehouse at Microsoft. So we're going to have a conversation on what DBT Labs does for our customers, where it comes into the picture with Microsoft Fabric, how it fits into that whole Microsoft Fabric ecosystem. So with that, Kyle, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us about what DBT Labs does? What problem is it trying to solve for our customers? And also, what's your role?
Yeah. First, thank you for having me here, Swetha and Tino. I'm so excited to be at FabCon. I think this week has been incredible so far. Again, my name is Kyle Dempsey. I lead our partner solutions architect team at DBT Labs. And so our partner solutions architects work across our partner ecosystem, both on the product and the go-to-market capacity to build kind of synergies across the ecosystem. And so obviously Microsoft being a key partner to DBT Labs, especially when we think about Fabric and Spark and all the other great things that you guys are doing. My team is very close to that work. And so if you haven't heard of DBT Labs, first would recommend you stop by our booth, which is right around the corner over there. But DBT Labs is the company originally called Fishtown Analytics in 2016 that created the product DBT. And so DBT historically stood for Data Build Tool. It's kind of like AT&T now. We don't use that acronym. We just call it DBT. But it's a framework that allows analytics engineers to develop analytics assets using SQL. And so that sounds really basic and simple, but what that actually means is it took what was conventionally a either highly technical workflow or a kind of GUI-driven basic UI workflow, and it created a middle ground where anyone that knew SQL could be what we call an analytics engineer, which allows them to, again, create models, create tables in their data warehouse just using SQL. And then as you build with SQL, things like documentation, things like tests, observability across your pipelines, all of that is built into the platform. So from the analytics engineer perspective, I'm writing SQL queries, but as an outcome, I get observability into my pipelines. I get thoroughly documented tables that can be easily understood. And I get the ability to scale rapidly. And so that framework became incredibly popular in the data community, right? Reaching the community of over 150,000 members now, 90,000 plus organizations using DBT in some capacity. DBT Platform is the cloud-hosted SaaS version of that DBT Labs hosts and manages. And so DBT Platform gives you all the functionality of DBT Core, but includes things like enterprise-grade observability, security, scheduling, orchestration, and many other things that make it an enterprise-grade platform. I think we're going to talk about it a little bit today, but really excited to have DBT now live directly within the Fabric ecosystem as well. And so one of the things we've been partnering with the Fabric team on is integrating DBT, the technology, directly into Fabric Data Factory. So it's at the hands of anyone that's accessing Fabric Data Warehouse, Fabric Spark, and so they can take advantage of that workflow.
This is phenomenal, Kyle. I want to kind of demystify a little bit. So if you think about traditionally SQL developer, so you don't have to be a SQL developer, but it's a happy medium where you are converging yourself into this data analytics or data engineering sort of role with DBT as a platform. So that is phenomenal. Now I would love to understand from Tino, because you're the brains behind shaping the product for what it is today from a Fabric data warehouse and analytics perspective. Talk to us about let's start with data warehouse. Tell us about what data warehouse as a workload plays a role within the Fabric ecosystem and where DBT Labs fits into that picture.
Yes, of course. Thanks for having me as well, Swetha. So Fabric Data Warehouse lives in a really interesting place inside of Fabric, right? It's a brand new technology, right? So it's been architected within the last few years. It went GA a couple of years ago. And so it's got a highly innovative architecture that kind of draws from the best in class of what the state of the art industry has done. And the role the Fabric Data Warehouse plays is it really complements our Spark data engineering product in a way that maybe one way to think about it is Spark is kind of like this big old diesel that can pull a lot of load up the hill, but takes a second to get going. Fabric Data Warehouse is more of this really fast, snappy sports car that goes around the corners and goes 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. So it's obviously it's SQL first. So lots of SQL people here. It's very, very, very fast for all types of shapes and sizes, especially in like the serving the application layer. And also it's a data warehouse. So it has transactionality. It does really well with structured data, right? It's really great for these kind of like, normalized, like solely change dimensions, ERP, CRM style workloads. So Fabric Data Warehouse plays a really integral role. We are the fastest growing GA engine in all of Fabric, right? It's a testament to the adoption here. Yes, thanks. Thank you, Chris. But obviously you have a lot of choice within Fabric, right? And this is where I think also DBT comes in. I want to second what Kyle said is, kind of the evolution of our industry has been really interesting to observe, right? Maybe 15 years ago, if you wanted to do big data, nobody says big data anymore, right? This is data. You needed to be a software developer, right? You needed to know Java. You need to know what shuffle is. If you don't, you're going to have a bad time, right? Then, the ecosystem has evolved and gotten, more mature. And now you needed to be only a data engineer, right? You needed to know Python. You needed to still reason around distributed systems, right? And then the data warehouses became so mature that, and this is where DBT came in, right? Now there was this hunger for everyone, all these folks here who know SQL, right? But they don't have the software development backgrounds that data engineers might have. But they're itching to be in the transformation layer. They're itching to build these pipelines, to build these models. And so DBT armed these SQL professionals with the tool to do software development type best practices in data. And then, of course, the analytics engineer was born, right? And it's an entire family of jobs, right? That's evolved there. It's very powerful. It's kind of squeezed the classic data engineer into more of a DevOps role. So DBT has really taken the whole industry by storm, is what I would say.
That is wonderful. Now I want to go back to Kyle and then just sort of lay the foundation that DBT is not yet another SQL transformation tool, but it is much beyond and more than that. Based on all the things that Tino said, it is a platform in itself. Now, what was the rationale, or let me start with the customer perspective. What customers, journey did you think really scaled DBT Labs? Or what type of industries? Now, are there any segmentations that you can talk about from a customer journey perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. So DBT is domain agnostic, as is Fabric, as are most data platforms. And so from an industry perspective, it's fairly widely adopted across pretty much every industry you can think of. There are specific groups in different industries that are more inclined to use our open source platform or more inclined to use DBT platform, the cloud-hosted SaaS version. And that usually comes down to what the requirements are around, again, things like enterprise-grade security, observability, where and how it's hosted, resiliency, and those kinds of things. And so from that perspective, really any organization can adopt DBT. Again, to Tino's point, one of the things that DBT did that was really revolutionary in the space is it created a new job function. It created this analytics engineer function that was a user that was closer to the business than conventionally a data engineer was, but also could work in a highly technical capacity. And so what that meant for a business is you had analytics engineers that were building models, that were building analytics assets on the data warehouse that understood how those impacted the business as well, and were able to iterate on them very quickly to deliver value to the ecosystem. And that became really, really powerful. And not only did we create did DBT create that function, it created really strong career paths for the individuals that adopted DBT as well. And so in addition to adding value to the organization, at the individual level, it really significantly amplified the careers of those users that chose to learn DBT. I myself was in that bucket. So I was a user that I had worked on a data team in the airline space. This is many years ago, and was using a tool that was highly UI driven. And as somebody that knew SQL and somebody that had that background, I knew how to write a query against the data warehouse, but I had to go through a bunch of steps before I got to that point to build my transformation. And that became really cumbersome to me. And Tino and I were just talking about this the other day, but I spent more time trying to figure out how to get around the guardrails that those tools put in place than I did actually building queries. And so the first time I used DBT, it was like a revelation to me. DBT said, this is how you're supposed to work. You are somebody that knows SQL. you're somebody that understands your data warehouse, you also sit close to the business. This is the best way for you to work. And that vision that worked for me was extremely popular amongst this community that we now call analytics engineers. And that kind of spread again across just about every industry that you can imagine.
What you mentioned is, how customers are adopting DBT and how easy it is for them to get started.
Yeah.
What we do at Microsoft is, we meet customers where they are in their journey. Things like this and partnerships like this really attest to what we are trying to do and bring to bear for our customers. We're not trying to rip everything that they already put together, but instead we are embracing whatever the tool set or products that they're actually using and bringing them into the Fabric journey. So talk to us about how did you embrace DBT as part of the Fabric workflow, Tino?
Yeah, I think it was quite easy actually. To second what Kyle said, there's a micro dynamic that's happening. There's lots of folks that are adopting DBT just because it's really useful and it helps with their careers and there's an amazing community. But kind of maybe from the top down, I think the perspective that I'm seeing is, and I've been in this industry quite some time, and I almost never see an organization that when they go cloud native, right, when they adopt these more liberated technologies like Fabric Data Warehouse, it's hard to find negative ROI for analytics, right? There's this immense pent-up demand within organizations for more and more data-driven decisions, right? There's reporting, it's applications, it's transformations, and so on and so forth, so forth. And the challenge typically is it's kind of scary, right? There's the cost might be going up, or maybe customers are internal customers, users are complaining, things aren't as fast. So you need to kind of scale with the demand and you provide the right ROI. And I think this is where DBT steps in, right? DBT allows for a more responsible, right, software development style embrace of kind of like that pent-up demand. And so from that perspective, I think it was a no-brainer, right? DBT is a core tool for the modern data practitioner. And we have to be part of that community. We have to give our customers the capabilities that they badly need.
No, that is wonderful. If I sort of take a step back, let's say I'm a customer with using heavy DBT usage for all my SQL transformations, for all the data warehouse that I'm putting together for my organization. How easy it is to plug and play? Is it like a plug and play when we want to adopt all the things that we're putting? You'll know why I'm talking about this because we're going to talk about the AI journey because all things converge to AI eventually. So let's say for me as a customer, bringing all this DBT goodness to Fabric, what would that mean from an AI perspective?
That's a great question. So you might have heard a little bit about AI over the last few days.
Little bit.
Just a tiny bit, yeah. And in my core note, the way I phrased it was AI is kind of shifting left all of our work. We're becoming more of system thinkers, right? We have the background, we connect the business with technology, and AI is doing more and more of the actual doing, right? And so essentially you kind of have a helper, like you have this virtual team of data engineers or analytics engineers that are working for you. They're kind of a little bit of a wild west. Sometimes they have a bad day, right? They make mistakes as well. So but now it's at an arm's reach. You're supervising somebody else's work, right? You're still responsible for their work, but now you need to look over the shoulder of this virtual assistant you have, especially with these really advanced developer tools like Copilot CLI, Cloud Code, Cursor, right? Where you can embrace those agent skills we talked about. And so the importance of responsible analytics, right, is paramount now. And that's where DBT steps in, right? Without DBT, you can still do all the same things, but you might not have the same level of control. You might not get the same level of lineage observability, things like that. You put DBT in there, and all of a sudden things are a little bit more peaceful, a little bit more responsible.
Perfect. So I would be remiss if I don't ask the same question on where is DBT Labs heading towards in terms of AI?
Yeah, I think it's a really, I mean, I think everyone in this room probably experiences the same thing I do, which is every month, probably for the last 3 years, I have been able to do something with AI that the previous month I didn't think was possible. And that has happened every single month for, again, the past 3 years, including this month. And all of those use cases that have been really beneficial to DBT, the business, but also to every other business that are powered by it, all of them have the same kind of both problem and solution, which is they all require context. They require context about the business. They require context about the data. They require context about the user that's interacting with the system. And that context exists in many forms, right? It exists in unstructured data, institutional knowledge stored in a number of different sources across the ecosystem. But one of the strongest and most powerful signals that you can give an AI system is structured data. And so structured data to inform your models, inform your AI use cases, and drive real business outcomes as a result of that is, in my opinion, the biggest revelation that's come out of the AI kind of world in the last few years. But the same problems that exist in that use case are the ones that existed in BI, in reporting, in analytics for the entire history of analytics, which is you have to be able to trust the data, and the data has to be correct and it has to be updated, and you have to be able to explain why it's that way. Why is the number this number, and why is it not this number that I saw in a spreadsheet somewhere else? And that part is really, really important. In DBT, interestingly, the things that made it valuable to the BI world and the analytics engineering world are equally valuable, or if not more valuable, in the AI world, which is each transformation step you build in DBT creates context. It creates information in the form of metadata about the table. It creates metadata about the columns. It creates lineage, so you know exactly what happened to that column when it went from table A to table B. You know what transformation step took place. You know information about the last time that data updated and when it's going to update next. And so all of that becomes metadata that you can feed into Copilot, you can feed into your AI model, and you can use that context to build trust. And again, the same problem that exists in the BI world exists in the AI world, which is if you don't trust it, you can't use it. It doesn't have value at that point. And so building trust in AI systems through explainability that comes from the context that DBT can generate in the form of structured data is the biggest value add that I've seen in the last months.
So I want to kind of take a gist of what you mentioned about having that trust with what you're putting together. So in the BI world, every data engineer can attest to, hey, on the report, I see this number. Let's trace back to where it came from. Oh, that's so much fun. But with all the contextual intelligence that we are adding, it is becoming very, very seamless and really important for everybody consuming that data that it's not that difficult anymore. Once you set the foundation really properly, I think you're set up for success. No more going back to, oh, this function calls to that store procedure. That store procedure in turn calls another store procedure. I think gone are those days where we are really bringing all that contextual intelligence to bear for all the goodness that AI can bring. So wonderful. Now, I want to sort of take a drill down on all the things that you mentioned on the DBT labs or the DBT framework. Kyle, let's say there are multiple dependencies that you have created with the ETL project that you put together. When you bring that to Fabric, all the dependencies, how are you going to manage and orchestrate that?
That's a good question. So I'll mention a few things, but one thing that Fabric in the Fabric ecosystem does exceptionally well is it brings multiple technologies into one platform and makes them accessible. And all of the majority of those technologies sit on top of OneLake. And so when you talk about both choice for the user of the system, as well as flexibility for the business, avoiding things like being locked into a single workflow or a single platform or a single type of way of doing things, that's where DBT adds an immense amount of value. We have what we call a mesh architecture, which means especially when you have all the data living in a unified system like OneLake, the compute layer that's driving the analytics becomes relatively portable, right? The technology itself that DBT models are built on is an open standard in the form of SQL. Lots of different platforms run SQL, right? And so in the realm of moving something into Fabric, for example, to Fabric Data Warehouse, that SQL may need some minor refactoring. AI and agentic development has made that significantly easier to the point where it's pretty much a click of the button now. And at that point, those models, that lineage, those artifacts that you've created on any platform become portable. And so repointing them to Fabric Data Warehouse, the data already lives in OneLake. It becomes pretty much just a matter of updating your configuration to choose where you want the jobs to run. And when we talk about mesh-based architecture and choice and flexibility, you can do multiple at the same time. So for example, if you have the bronze layer of your analytics developed in Spark, and that's running through Fabric Spark, and that's again reading and writing from OneLake, you can then have that analytics be accessed in the silver gold layer on Fabric Data Warehouse. Both of those systems run on dbt, and you have lineage between them. So you know that this model that's powering my dashboard, that's powering my AI use case, and the gold layer comes from these transformation steps that take place on Fabric Data Warehouse, and then these transformation steps that take place on Fabric Spark. And that completeness becomes really valuable.
That is huge. Like I said, no more which calls what. We all know where the lineage exists. Perfect. I want to sort of move to what is looking ahead kind of looks like for both DBT Labs and the partnership between DBT Labs and Fabric. Maybe we'll start with you, Tino.
Yeah, I think, by the way, maybe I'll pitch on your behalf. FabCon is definitely my favorite conference. But outside of FabCon, the DBT conference that they hold in September every year these days is really, really fun, right? It's kind of like the hipster data practitioner conference, a lot of energy, a lot of really interesting stuff going on. And so we definitely want to be a part of that community in a big way, right? I think Microsoft has been missing out a little bit here, right? And to Kyle's point, we don't want to be building our own community in that sense, right? There's already a massive community, perhaps the biggest vendor-independent community out there in data, and we need to be a part of that. I think that's one. And then on the product side, of course, we want to make it easier. Between us and DBT, we want to make it easier for Fabric to be used alongside DBT. So some things have already shipped, right? In Data Factory, you can run DBT jobs already. There's open source connectors that you can use on your own or as part of Fabric, right? The DBT is already in Fabric Marketplace as well. And maybe Kyle can talk more about DBT Fusion, right? Which is a relatively new version of DBT that is also, will come to Fabric hopefully very soon. There is a DBT Fusion connector in private preview that was just announced this week. Super excited. But there's so much more we can do together. And yes, we don't want to be building a DBT competitor, right? There's a very clear market leader in DBT. It's a company called DBT. And of course they have the technology, they have the community. So we just want to be very best friends.
Perfect. So Kyle, your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I hope to see you all at DBT conference in September as well. That's obviously, again, to your point, hope to see you there also.
Yeah.
It's a really collaborative environment that is based both in our customers and in our community. And our community is what drives DBT. And our community has been asking us for deeper integrations into the Fabric ecosystem. And that's really why we are here, right? DBT Labs exists because of our community, and our primary focus is driving value in that community. And again, they've asked us for deeper integrations into Fabric. And so that investment is really important both for us as a company, but also for maintaining and growing and scaling that community and staying on the cutting edge of what's coming in the ecosystem. So Tino mentioned Fusion. So a little bit of background here. DBT was created in 2016. It was built on Python. It was an open source project, and it was accessible to everyone. Again, that's what made it popular in the analytics engineering community, because of the accessibility and really the simplicity in some ways. And that framework has worked for 10 years, right? 2026, DBT core, written in Python 10 years ago, is still extremely widely used, but technology has evolved, right? And so it became time to look at the things that were working in DBT and then seeing where we could add more capability. So DBT Fusion, which is the next version of the DBT engine, is written in Rust. And it's kind of three things. It is a compiler, it is stateful, and because it's written in Rust, it is faster. And so what do each of those mean? It's a compiler. So it acts like an actual code compiler. It compiles SQL before sending it to the data warehouse. And that gives you, one, a lot more metadata about the transformations that are taking place, but it also makes DBT a lot more intelligent. So things like type ahead and autocomplete and assistive development, things that work in like software engineering, but weren't accessible in SQL just because of how SQL worked, those now can happen in Fusion. Also, that really dramatically improves the agentic development experience because it gives agents the ability to compile your code. So an agent can compile without running on the warehouse. It can iterate very quickly, and it can understand what's taking place. The second is it's stateful. And so DBT Fusion knows your project state, it knows the state of your data, and it has, like, effectively, it has memory. And so what that means is if a model runs and then you have it scheduled to run again 5 minutes later, but there's no new data in that period of time, it won't run it again because it knows there is no new data. And so that gives you an immediate efficiency gain, and it keeps the cost to value ratio of running DBT in kind of the place where you want it to be, where everything that DBT is doing is driving value. And then finally, as I mentioned, it's built on Rust. If any of you are Rust nerds out there, I don't need to explain it to you, but really what that means is it's just a lot faster than DBT core was, right? Up to 30 times faster on parse and compile. Again, for user experience and agentic development, both of those benefit from that. And so we took that Fusion framework, and we have, again, just released in the preview this week our Fusion Fabric Data Warehouse adapter. We have on the way in the back half of the year a Fabric Spark adapter for Fusion as well, so we can fully support OneLake. And to Tino's point, we are bringing both of those to our native integration into Fabric Data Factory, which we call DBT Jobs. So right now, both of those run our core tech, but we are bringing Fusion to that experience as well. And so you can have the best possible DBT experience, regardless of whether you're running it locally, using our open source, within Fabric directly, or within DBT platform.
Perfect. So based on everything that you mentioned, the future is looking great for both DBT and Microsoft Fabric integration. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Kyle and Tino, today.
What a conversation. Everything you've been watching here was captured live at FabCon and SQLCon in Atlanta, from the interviews to the demos to the community insights that make these events so special. If you're into Microsoft Fabric, SQL, and the future of data, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And speaking of next, we're taking this show to Barcelona. FabCon and SQLCon Barcelona are happening this September 2026, and it's going to be packed with big announcements, deep technical sessions, and one amazing global data community. Hit the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen to register and use code FABTV to save 200 euros off your ticket. As always, thank you so much for watching. Keep being awesome, and we'll see you in the next one.